Okay, hear me out on this one. So I'm going to make the case that it's still not worth it to sleep around as an attractive male or man that has a lot of sexual access. And this video, it's not a criticism, it's more like a spiritual protection for the discerning individual. And I'm going to make the case for this. So we hear it a lot with women that sleep around, pretty girl that gets a really high body count, it's unattractive to guys. But it's equally as unattractive to a woman with a good head on her shoulders, a man that's got a ridiculous body count. Secondly, I've just been looking at some of the recent cases on the news. You got on both sides of the political aisle and different status levels, it doesn't really matter. You got famous actors and content creators going to jail over accusations and stuff like that arises from people that they slept with years and years ago. So you got your Brett Kavanaughs, you got your Johnny Depps, you got like people all over the map, Donald Trump, running into these issues. If you're someone who's interested in ascending in life or being a prominent figure or someone who's noteworthy or renowned, you don't want to be careless with your life, with your energy, and entangle yourself with some chick that's maybe on medication or a little bit crazy because you were too horny to keep it in your pants. And I'm not telling men not to have sex. I'm simply making the case that monogamy, I still believe, has value. And it's not to say that the current social fabric and the woman's part in this current social fabric isn't utterly destructive, because it is. I see it too. I see it. But I still think that it's worth it to be discerning with your selection and who you're with, and have a long-term relationship with someone that you foster some level of trust in love with, and have sex hundreds or thousands of times with that one person, as opposed to sleeping with dozens of women. And you could make the biological argument that there wouldn't be STDs because some people will say, look, it's just we're animals and we have hormones and we're designed to just do that. And for a guy, it means nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It means as much to have sex, physical intimacy, as it does for a woman. And I actually don't think that that's entirely true. I think that there's a level of unconsciousness that's required in order to have sex frequently with different women. And I've A/B tested this myself, okay? I haven't had dozens and dozens of relationships, but I've had long-term relationships, and I've briefly experimented with okay, what would it be like to sleep with 3 different girls in a short period of time, right? Over the course of maybe a month, 3 different individuals, and just seeing what that would feel like. And to some of you, that's nothing. But for me, coming out of I had one relationship that was a year, another of them was 3 years. I've had a 7-year relationship, and I've had my one night stands, and I've done that just to know what it's like, just to be able to comment on it. And I can still say that my body count is single digits, and I actually prefer that. I am not ashamed of that at all. Some men, they like to boast about having a really high body count, and it's sort of like a red pill take to just use women for sex and that's it. And I think that a lot of that sentiment comes from a place of bitterness, of maybe exiting a bad relationship or getting screwed over. And I think that you get screwed over when you're not discerning in the first place. And I'm not telling people to get married. I'm not telling people to sign contracts and to get the government involved. I'm aware. I know. I see what has happened to our elders, the Gen X's and the boomers and the older guys that have gotten screwed over and divorced. I've seen it and I hear that. I'm simply saying that there's still a case for being a discerning individual, a discerning male, you know, and not just recklessly having sex. And I see people spouting that out, and it's sort of like this bravado thing where you just use women for sex. And in my experience, like, I grew up in New England, and I've been around, I grew up with a lot of female friends that went to Ivy League schools, that were actually intelligent, come from a good family, come from old money. And you're not gonna, you can attract the chick with fake lips and fake, you know, some chick from a different country, or like some Eastern European that's just super materialistic and super, what, you know, with everything, plastic surgery and all that in Miami and whatnot, and be a materialistic person, you know, with a yacht or something like that. And you can attract, don't get me wrong, you can attract girls from New England or anywhere for that matter like that. But there are decent women out there. There are, in fact, some decent women out there. And I think that it just requires a little bit of patience, And you can still get hurt. This is not, I'm not telling guys to be soft. I'm just saying that if you want to be, even if you want to be the top person in your company, it's not necessarily about being a politician or being an actor or being a celebrity that you would have to worry about this. You know, if you're going to do big things in life, your reputation matters. It really matters. And the way you treat people matters. And it's better, it's safer, and you're spiritually protecting yourself by thinking this way, as opposed to adopting this user mindset that let the toxic women and the dudes who are not aware and aren't dialed in individuals do that. You know, you don't need to do that. If you're planning on going somewhere, you got to protect your energy. You got to protect, and people sense the kind of woman that you attract when you signal that you don't require sex and that you can be patient, and then you can keep it together, and that's not your priority. You're focused on your purpose. You're focused on your career. You're focused on helping your family and your community and making money so that you can be a generous individual, a discerning and generous individual. You know, that is going to attract a very specific woman. And you're much better off having a long-term relationship with that kind of woman where you have sex with her hundreds of times, as opposed to the chick that is just super materialistic, only interested in Instagram followers, you know, has her Instagram profile in her Hinge so she can just have these orbiting desperate men around her. And you just want to be the dude who's screwing that chick? Or do you want to be the guy who's with the you know, Northeastern graduate who's got a good degree, got a good head on her shoulders, and wants a legitimate relationship? And don't get me wrong, in these, just because a chick went to college or she's a nice girl, comes from a good family, does not inherently mean that she's a good person, right? But the same is true for men. You know, you have to vibe it out. You've got to feel it out. But there's certain indicators you can look for. And being a sensitive person is a good thing. And I don't mean sensitive like in a snowflakey way. I mean sensitive like you can feel, you would know if there's you're walking down the street and you would know that the dude who's just a little ways behind you might be trying to rob you. That kind of sensitive, you know, or someone's trying to sneak up, like street smart sensitive, because relationships actually require street smarts. And this is the thing that you don't hear a lot. It's not about being a goody two shoes or being a nice guy or someone that's going to get screwed over and manipulated easily by these women, because trust me, they're growing more and more adept at doing exactly that. And a lot of guys can attest to that. But men lead the way. We lead the way with our energy. We lead the way with how we move through this world, and we get to dictate what the collective consciousness is filtered through. And so I think that we're not hearing that kind of a take enough. You know, it's very popular to just, the whole Machiavellian attitude. I see it everywhere now, everywhere. And that is only going to breed, you don't get peace from having a chaotic attitude or a reckless attitude. You get more chaos. You get more chaos. And I look at the guys who sleep with woman after woman after woman after woman, and it is very rare. It is very rare that they have a peaceful life. It's not like you just get to segment this one aspect of your sexuality, and then your business is peaceful, and then you know your family life is peaceful, your everything else is easy and not also shaky. So where there's smoke, there's fire. You know, and this isn't necessarily a popular take, but look at the dudes who have promoted polygamy and, you know, having multiple women and just, you know, flying chicks all over the world and all this stuff. And a lot of the times they end up in jail, or you're just, even if you're not necessarily abusing women, but you're just the kind of person that's towing that line where it could look like you might be, you got to really ask yourself, is that really what you want? Is that really what you want? Because, I mean, you got people, I remember years ago, I said the Brett Kavanaugh thing earlier. I mean, that's just like a high school party situation, and it came back to haunt him, you know, but you have people doing a lot worse than that. So that's why, personally, I've kept my body count low deliberately. And I'm not a 10 out of 10 dude, but I don't think I'm ugly either. So I've had a lot more opportunities than I've said no to, that I've said yes to. And I prefer it that way. And I've slept with some beautiful women that were extremely classy. And I've done the opposite also. So I feel like I can comment on this. And I also know what each of those women want. I've been with the woman who's a liar and a cheater, and I've been with the chick who comes from a really good family and ends up, you know, having a really good career and is an amazing individual. So this isn't me telling men to be naive. You got to be dialed in this landscape. I'm fully aware of that. Okay. I'm just saying that peace is still a priority, and you set the pace for that, not someone else. So that's my 2 cents on this. You know, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just giving you, I'm letting you hear something that you might have felt in your own consciousness. I'm letting you hear it from someone else. So that's my 2 cents on that. Peace out. See you in the next video.